Hello everyone, welcome to the Old Man and the Read. My name is Jerry. Today I'm going to discuss the books I've read by one of the most highly acclaimed writers of all time, Vladimir Nabokov. He was a Russian and American novelist, born in 1899 and died in 1977. But he was just an extraordinarily acclaimed writer, wrote exceptional books. And the first few books that he wrote were actually written in Russian while he lived in Berlin. He then later moved to America, where he actually achieved international acclaim after moving to America and writing books in English. And that's the really outstanding thing about him, is that he was Russian, writing in English, but writing some of the most spectacular prose in English that there is. And eventually, later in years, he moved back to Europe, to Switzerland. But just exceptional books, exceptional writing. Some of them were a little uncomfortable reading, but mostly excellent books. In the first book I have, published in 1930, is The Defense, and this follows a young boy named Luzin, who is a child prodigy in chess. But he has some mental problems, and he's unable to communicate and converse with other people. But he grows up to become a chess master, but eventually suffers a nervous breakdown and descends into madness. In 1933, he published Laughter in the Dark. This follows a wealthy middle-aged man named Albinus. Albinus is in a rather dull marriage, and he's unhappy with it. But he meets a young girl named Margot. He becomes infatuated with her, and she's very manipulative, and he falls completely under her spell. The two of them then move in together, but Margot actually has another lover on the side, but she has complete control over Albinus, so he believes everything she tells him until things completely unravel. In 1936, he published Invitation to a Beheading, and this is really a comedy of the absurd. It follows a man named Cincinnatus, and he's been condemned to death by beheading, and is put into a prison cell to await his execution. He gets involved in a few situations with some entertaining characters while in prison, but his concern is that he has never been told when the execution is going to happen, and so he's left in total ignorance about the event as he awaits it. In 1938, he published The Gift, and this follows a young Russian writer who has left Russia and gone to Berlin, where he has a book of poetry that is published. Rather, follows Nabokov's own life history here, but he begins then working on a biography of a philosopher named Chernyshevsky, and this book is later published. But I felt that this book, basically was an excuse for Nabokov to write in very long, protracted narratives about literature and poetry. Beautifully written book, though. The next book I have was actually written in 1939, called The Enchanter. This was written in Russian, but wasn't published until several years later. But this is about a pedophile, a subject that Nabokov seemed to return to a couple other times. But he's a pedophile who stumbles upon a beautiful preteen girl of about 12, I think she was, whose mother is dying. He takes advantage of this situation and marries the mother, intending to inherit the girl later. It's a subject that Nabokov has used in a couple other books, and it's very much seems to be a predecessor to Lolita, although it is a rather different story. In 1941, he published The Real Life of Sebastian Knight, and this was the first book that Nabokov wrote in English. But it's about a young man who is the brother of a famous author named Sebastian Knight. Sebastian Knight has died, and the brother intends to write a biography about him. As the brother is researching Sebastian Knight's life, he discovers that that his brother had been in a brief love affair with a woman that was actually the reason for Sebastian's breakup of his marriage. And so the brother wants to interview the woman that was in the love affair, but he has very scant clues on anything about her, and so it starts him in a search to try to locate her, and that's what much of the book is about. In 1947, he published Bend Sinister, and this is a rather dystopian type tale. It's about a newly formed dictatorial government that demands complete obedience from its citizens. The leader of the newly formed dictatorship, Paddock, wants his childhood friend Krug, who is a college or university professor now, to write or to give a speech in favor of the government, but Krug refuses to do it. In 1955, he published Lolita. This is probably Nabokov's most famous book. It's just brilliantly written, but it's a tale that puts the reader in the head of a pedophile named Humbert. He is a pedophile who has his sights on a 12-year-old girl named Dolores Hayes. He eventually marries the girl's mother, and then that mother dies in a car accident. And so Humbert takes the young girl with him on a cross-country trip, and they have an affair together. It's really an uncomfortable subject, but brilliantly written by Nabokov, and that kind of takes the sting away from it. In 1957, he published Pinion, and this is about a slightly bumbling professor who has emigrated from Russia to America. He's a man who has very good intentions, but things never seem to go the things he would have liked, or the way he would have liked. But it's an entertaining story, but really the real greatness to the book was Nabokov's writing itself. In 1962, he published Pale Fire. This is a book that is a beautiful blending of poetry and prose, but it's about an editor named Charles Kinbot. He has acquired exclusive rights to a 1,000-line poem by a poet named John Shade, following Shade's death. But in the book, or in the publication, he then presents the poem with his own commentary and of the poem, commentary of the poem. But as he's going, he starts straying more and more away from the poem, and really exposes his own megalomaniac and deranged mind. In 1969, he published Ada. This is regarded as Nabokov's masterpiece by most people, but it's basically a love story, but because it's by Nabokov, it's a little different. So it's not your typical love story. It's told by a man named Van Veen, and he's discussing a lifelong love affair he's had that was off and on by who turned out to be his sister Ada. At first, when they first met, he thought, or they thought they were cousins, but it turns out that they were actually brother and sister. It's written as if it were a memoir by Van Veen when he was in his 90s, I think it was. But beautifully written book. In 1972, he published Transparent Things. And this is a short little novella that tells the story of a man named Hugh Person. He's becomes increasingly unbalanced, the story is basically about the several trips he makes to Switzerland. In 1973, he published A Russian Beauty and Other Stories, but it's I didn't think any of the stories were that outstanding. I think the best story in the book was titled Lips to Lips, and this was the story about an unsuccessful writer who believes that he has finally written a book that will be published. In 1974, he published Look at the Harlequins, and this is a fictitious memoir by a fictitious Russian writer named Vadimovich. It's a very similar tale to Nabokov's own life story, but it's about the writer leaving Russia to live in Berlin and then later Paris before coming to America, where he writes books in English. It's a rather humorous tale, and much of it is about these several marriages that he was in. And the last book I have was actually published several years after Nabokov's death in 2017. Insomniac Dreams. And this is a book I saw in a bookstore. I never gave much thought to it. I thought it was just another novel that I hadn't read by Nabokov, so I picked it up. But it's actually a book about an experiment Nabokov conducted where he recorded dreams that he had immediately after awakening. And he got the idea for doing this by reading a book by a man named Dunn entitled Experiments with Time. And it led Nabokov to believe that dreams were actually memories of things to come in the future. It was an interesting read, but not really what I was hoping for. But it was still nicely written. So those are the books I've read by Vladimir Nabokov. Exceptional writer, extremely highly regarded, and one of the true greats that we've had. So I'd like to thank you for watching the video, and hopefully I'll see you again on another. Thanks.